Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video we're traveling to the UK, so look forward to that if that's your thing. And we're going to take a look at a story that you probably heard about in London, skipping the merry old this time for a change, you know yourself, mixing it up. On a dark midweek March evening, you're leaving your mate's house, walking home like millions of others do each and every day. But it didn't end that way. No one came out of this one looking too hot, and it's ultimately infuriating, so look forward to that. Seems to be a running thread here. So let's give it a go. In southwest London lies Leithwaite Road, in the borough of Wandsworth. Man, those Harry Potter books didn't have to invent jack shit. Leithwaite Road is primarily occupied by young families. And when you look at it, it kind of looks like what you think most London neighbourhoods look like. And it was at about 9 PM on the 3rd of March 2021 that 33-year-old Sarah Everard left one of these houses via the back gate. She had been at the house with some friends over for dinner, and now, as the evening darkened, she was walking to her home in Brixton Hill, which would take her usually take her about the guts of an hour. And though late enough, as winter still had its claws out, Wandsworth was statistically one of the safer areas in London. From Leithwaite Road, she walked to Poinders Road, crossing Clapham Common. As she walked, she spoke to her boyfriend, Josh, on the phone for about 15 minutes, with the call ending at roughly 9:28 PM. And after that, she disappeared. Sarah Everard worked as a marketing executive, growing up in the northern city of York, the youngest of three. Her dad worked as a professor at York University, and her mother worked in charity industry? Some of them. She would attend Fulford School, where, the headmaster, he would say she was smart, and she was well liked by the other people who attended it with her. She would go on to study human geography at Durham University, studying things like climate change and economic, social, and political geography. And then when she finished up that, in 2008, she moved all the way down south to London to work as a marketing account manager. Ending up in Brixton, a pretty popular place for young professionals. She would work for various public relations and marketing agencies, before ending up at a digital media agency in Holborn. A new job she had just started in February 2021. It was just a few weeks after she started that new job as a group account director that walking home, dark evening, she never made it. The next day, Sarah, well, during that phone call, she had said, when she was talking to her boyfriend, they were due to meet up. Obviously, she never showed. She was then reported missing at about 8:10 in the PM on the 4th of March, with fears growing the longer they hadn't heard from her. The very next day, on the 5th of March, the case was escalated, and the Specialist Crime Unit became involved in the investigation and the search. And so the search for clues began, focusing on the park she crossed through for a while, Clapham Common, and the avenues she may have gone down.
Good afternoon, my name's Detective Chief Inspector Catherine Goodwin, leading the investigation into the disappearance of Sarah Everard. I just wanted to provide you with an update into the investigation. It continues at pace. We are currently knocking on doors. We've spoken to over 750 different people and addresses have been visited. We continue to receive hundreds of calls from the public, received over 100 calls so far, and follow up the information and pursue every line of inquiry that comes out of that. We've reviewed hours of CCTV, around her movements on the night, but I appeal for people to come forward with more CCTV, particularly anyone with a dash cam, for example delivery drivers who may have been driving along Poinders Road on the Wednesday at around last Wednesday at around 9:30 at night. The evidence that you have on your dash cam could be absolutely vital to finding Sarah. We continue to search the area.
So what started out as, the police believing she didn't come to foul play, any harm. The days went by. Oh, think about that one again. Right, and so then they started looking into all the CCTV they could, and this was made easier because remember, this is early 2021. COVID lockdowns, regulations, they were still pretty tight. You weren't really allowed, outside of your house except to exercise, go shopping, medical reasons. And you certainly weren't allowed to mingle, in other people's houses outside of your bubble or whatever. So the streets would have been, relatively quiet. Therefore, any CCTV would see her. And so a bus driving down Poinders Road spotted Sarah, clear in her green jacket. And she was spotted talking to someone on the footpath. This was literally minutes after she finished her call with her boyfriend. Beside her and this unidentified person was a white Vauxhall Astra, parked with the hazard lights on. Now the police learned of people, who lived along the route Sarah would take home, and they, a good few of them had like Ring cameras and Nest cameras, doorbell cameras. All that kind of shit, right? And so she wasn't seen anyway on any of them. So they knew she never made it any further than this point. And a witness would later came forward, claiming they saw Sarah talking to this guy, and he arrested her and put her in the back of his car. The number plate on that car was visible, and the police, following up on it as fast as they could, learned that it was a hired car from Dover, way to the southeast of London. And from there, they learned who had actually hired the car. A man named Wayne Couzens had hired the car, and he'd left his name and his address. Now, who was he? He was a police officer, and he was arrested in connection with the disappearance of Sarah on the 9th of March.
Right. My name's... Can I take this off? No. Alright. Yeah? You want an Armstrong, bro? No. You sure? Yeah. Right. It's just more easier to talk to you. Yeah. What we're talking about. This is Aaron. Aaron Cash is also... Marcus Sands. Okay. So we're here to talk to you about Sarah. I'm going to show you a picture. Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Wayne was a 48-year-old Metropolitan Police officer, married to a Ukrainian named Elena for over 10 years, and a father of 2. He was a constable with the Met Police and lived in the town of Deal in Kent. About a 2.5-hour drive he'd make every day each way, working in central London. Wayne, the eldest of 2, was a mechanic for decades in the family business. And he'd also been in the Army Reserves. Before, in his late 30s, he joined the force. Quite late in life to become a cop, but fair enough. He joined the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, protecting nuclear power plants, and after that he ended up in the Met. In 2021 he worked as an armed diplomatic protection officer. Essentially what he would do is just guard different nations' embassies in London. On the 3rd of March 2021, the day Sarah went missing, he had just finished a 12-hour shift guarding the US embassy. Now Wayne has been linked, not definitively, to various acts of indecent exposure throughout the years. One happened in 2015 in Kent, and then another 3 days before Sarah went missing in London. As far as I can tell, he whipped his knob out. It was reported to the police but never followed up on. Also, when he was in the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, his nickname was the Rapist. Yeah, it's... what the shit. But what is definitively known, however, is that Wayne knew what he was doing. He had planned what he had done to Sarah. On the 28th of February, Wayne booked a white Vauxhall Astra from a firm in Dover, Kent. He did this using his personal details. He also bought a roll of self-adhesive carpet protector on Amazon, along with a handcuff key. On the 2nd of March at 7 p.m, he begins a 12-hour shift guarding the American Embassy in London, finishing up at 7 a.m. on the 3rd of March, after which he drives back home to Kent. He then picked up the hired car at Deal and began to drive back into London. Sarah, while he was driving back into London, she went and bought a bottle of wine on her way to her friend's house and headed in. Next thing, she was walking home, stopped by Wayne on Poinders Road. He'd stopped her as she was walking. He was off duty but wearing his police belt, and he arrested her under the false accusation of breaching COVID restriction guidelines. The COVID restrictions at the time were, as I said, you're not really supposed to be out and about, and you're definitely not supposed to be, visiting friends, right? So you can see how this would be kind of believable. A police officer will be disarming to most people, and during that time, the rules were changing every couple of weeks in most countries anyway, I know. Sarah, she was a good, nice... she'd never been in trouble with the police ever in her life, so she would have believed a police officer. She wouldn't have put up a fight or anything. And then, with her in the back of the car, they drove. It wouldn't have taken Sarah, a bright woman, to realize what was happening after they didn't go to the nearest police station. They drove to Kent, which would have been a long drive. And there he switched from the rental to his own Seat and drove to a secluded area, and then he raped her. Then he used his police issue belt to strangle her to death. This would have been by about 11:40 p.m. He then dumped her body in a woodland area he owned in Hodes Wood, near Ashford, Kent. His movements would all be tracked via his mobile phone. The next morning, he went out and bought a tart and a coffee. At about 8:30 a.m. on the 4th of March, after having his coffee, he returned the car. He then disposed of Sarah's phone in Sandwich, Kent. On the 5th of March, a Friday, he filled a petrol can and then went and burned her body. And then, sounding totally, friggin' normal, he called the vet because he was worried about his dog, who he thought might have, separation anxiety.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could book my dog in for the vet so I can have a discussion about issues, please. We think she's suffering from, separation anxiety.
This was, less than 48 hours after what he did. And not a bother on him, Not a bother on that piece of shit. He then bought builder's bags and hid Sarah's remains. And the following day, he took his family, his wife and his 2 kids, out to Hodes Wood, where he had hidden her body for a lovely, day out. Smell of fresh air. On the 8th of March, he reported in sick for work. And then on the 9th of March, police rocked up to his door, having tracked him from the CCTV footage, as the last person to have spoken with Sarah. About 40 minutes before they arrived, he wiped his mobile phone. At first, he says, none.
So we're here to talk to you about Sarah. Let me show you a picture. Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay. Sarah went missing. I'll show you some pictures of her on the day.
Okay.
Sarah went missing on Wednesday, and her parents, obviously, and her family are really worried about that now. The inquiry that's been conducted so far has led us to come and speak to you about it and to see what you know about Sarah. Okay. So, would you like to? Do you know where Sarah is?
No.
Right. Okay. Do you know anything about what happened to her?
I know that she went missing up in London somewhere. About a week ago or so. Just from what I got on the news.
Okay. Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, man.
Have you had any interactions with her at all?
No, why would I have personal interactions with her?
Well, it's very difficult because I can't go into a lot of the evidence because obviously that's not part of what an urgent interview is. Okay, this interview is just about trying to find her because
Sure.
she's been missing for a while now.
I'm sat in handcuffs and I know her, so you must have something to say that I know her.
Well, as I said, you've been arrested on suspicion of kidnap, and we believe that you've been involved in her disappearance and taking her away from her family.
Okay.
So we are trying to find her. Obviously, everybody is very worried about her. She's got, parents. She's got she's siblings. She's got a boyfriend. There's a lot of people who care about her.
Sure.
If you've seen her on the news, the number of people that are reaching out about her.
Sure.
They're looking for her every day, and she's missing. And it's our job, our primary job here, is to find her and to try and find her safe and well.
Okay.
Now, we believe that you know something about where she is, and that's why we're here, to look for her and to try and find her. And that's why we're talking to you now, is to try and get you to have a good think about it and tell us anything you can about where we might be able to find her.
Okay. Well, I am in financial, and I've been lent on by I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, whatever.
Then he invents a story. I'll let him tell it.
And they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and pick them to them. So I said, not happening. And it then came through that they're going to, on my family, take them away and they'll use them instead. But at that point, I had no option to try and find somebody. So I don't. There's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her. That's it. That is all I know to this group of people.
Basically, right, and this is off the dome. It's almost comical how much you can see his gears spinning as he invents this story. Real believable stuff about some Eastern European gang who were like trafficking women. Apparently one of their girls went missing, and so they threatened him to replace her. And so that's when he went out, kidnapped Sarah, and then they just, they flashed lights and took her.
Tell me about them. I need to find her. Tell me everything you know that you'll help me.
There was a white Sprinter van. They are was between sort of Lenham Maidstone area that I dropped her off. I still don't know. I don't know. They just I just parked my car up, and then the van come up behind me, flashed me, and they all jumped out, and then they took this girl. They said you've done good, and I don't know whether my family's going to be alright still. They threatened to take my family away from me. So at that point, I'm doing what I can to protect my family. That's it. So all I know is that it was a roundabout. We could drive there now. I could show you. But roughly, I don't know Lenham Maidstone area at all.
If we did it on Google, Maps, like Google Earth, if we drove it, would you like to do it?
I drove from Ashford to Maidstone.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
there's a roundabout that breaks up, I guess. So this is the first big roundabout that you come to. You carry straight over to Maidstone, but instead I went round that roundabout and back up another road. And at that point, I was flashed and pulled over. Guys got out, opened my door, opened that door, pushed me out against the front of the car, took the girl, drove off. That's it. They said, we'll be in touch. So I'm here. I'm off work with stress because I'm here to protect my family. I want to be here 24/7 for my family. They come from my family. I've got nothing myself. I've got no choice.
I'll go back through the route with you in a minute, alright? But how do they contact you? How did you contact them?
I tried to throw one of their call girls and rip her off. So she's told them, and they've got me. So
how do they? No, but honest, how do they contact you? How is it they've been in contact with you to make these threats?
They just tell me, be here. So Hotel Burston down in Folkestone, got be here. Okay, so I turned up. I've got no mobile number, and they have got my mobile number. They're obviously outside watching, following. I just, honestly...
How are they telling you to be there? How is it they're giving those directions?
Yeah, they'll come outside. So they'll be outside here.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, right, you're going to be in Folkestone at this time, or you're going to be in Ashford at this time. That's it. There's no links, no telephone numbers. I'm completely on my own, but at the same time being threatened. It had Romanian plates on the van.
Now, obviously, I'll say it anyway, the police did follow up on this, and they found it to be as believable as you do.
This is not the news that Sarah Everard's family wanted to hear. They are said to be distraught that a serving police officer has been arrested on suspicion of kidnap and murder. Now, there were significant developments today as detectives moved in on a number of locations in the Kent area, including the woodlands behind me here, where forensic officers have spent the day desperately searching for any clues that may lead them to the missing 33-year-old. Now, just to give you a sense of the scale of this operation, they had already searched 750 homes in the London area before honing in on one particular address in the town of Deal.
It was the next day, in the early evening, that Sarah was found.
This evening, detectives and search teams investigating Sarah's disappearance have found, very sadly, what appears to be human remains.
Wayne was then charged with her murder. He would later plead guilty to kidnap, rape, and murder. It seems he tried to self-harm in his cell. He was seen with marks on his forehead. I think he tried to bash his own skull in. Weird. He was taken to the hospital though and later released. It was in late September 2021 that the sentencing hearing began. On the 30th of September, Wayne Couzens was given a whole life sentence. That's life without parole. You will never be a free man again. This case was news around the globe. You know, there's a big outcry about women's safety, as there should be.
A frustration for women everywhere that the burden has been placed on us to stay safe rather than compelling men to change their behavior.
Her murder sparking a movement, a collective sense of grief, fear, and anger in women around the world.
When you look into it, the numbers are frankly shocking, and it was hoped that this would then lead to, never again. After Sarah's disappearance, police knocked on doors in the area, telling women to stay home for their safety, which is anger-inducing. People telling women, to watch where they go and what they wear, putting the onus on them, the victim, instead of doing something about the problem. Pretty gross. Happens all the time instead of, the actual problem here. The police also did not come out of this looking well at all. Well, first of all, the guy was a cop. Second of all, he had a history that the police hadn't investigated.
The police watchdog, the IOPC, is investigating why nothing came of the earlier allegations against Couzens. Why police took no action. 10 officers face misconduct charges. Thirdly, when there was a vigil on the 13th of March for Sarah, the police promptly decided to go in and just mess shit up. Not a good look, boys. Then, of course, the latest gem was this little piece of advice. That if women feel uncomfortable or in danger around a lone police officer, just like Wayne, how about you just flag down a passerby or knock on a door, to escape the lone police officer? Which is,
My son's girlfriend is, say, approached by who claims to be an undercover officer as she's walking home tomorrow. What do I tell her to do?
Well, the first thing to say is officers rarely deploy singly. But if anybody has any doubts about a police officer, then obviously they should question the officer about what they're doing and why they're doing it. If there are any doubts at all, they should ask to either speak to the control room using the officer's radio, or if in doubt, call 999 and ask a question.
But what sort of society have we come to, Mr. Malthouse, where we are so doubting of somebody who says they're a police officer that we think that we have to dial 999 to check?
This is a pretty anger-inducing story all around. This planned, premeditated attack on a woman he didn't know he was prowling the streets for someone. Damn. Usually trying to end my videos on a bit of a lighter note. Having trouble with this one, so... Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so and be here with me. Go on. I'll see you as always real soon in the next solo video. Until then, please take care. Bye.